I'm here on a few things with DSPS. I'm going to go through some of the plumbing issues that you have concerns about. And I'm also going to go through some of the new 327, I shouldn't say it's probably not that new anymore, 327 camping unit section. So basically 327 was basically put into effect on February 6th of 2017. You're probably getting used to it by now, hopefully, but it incorporates some things with the camping units. There's some things with plumbing in there. There are some things that still are in the plumbing code that we're trying to get revisions on, and I'm going to go through that also later. So some of the things that you're going to see on some of the brochures here, or I should say some of the slides here, it's going to basically talk about a DHS 178 because things haven't been updated. So it's actually DATCAP 79. So some of the other things just to be aware of. So confusing, yes, sometimes. So but change is good. I always say that. Change is good. So our resources that we have available on our website. And our website is fabulous if you ever tried it. I see. It's always ever changing, like every other website that's out there. So one of the things that I'm bringing this up for is that this camping unit one is really difficult to find. So I'm giving you basically a web address for it. I did have handouts. I'm not sure what happened to them. So, but that would be on there. So again, like I say, this page is a little difficult to find. I actually had a little difficulty finding it myself yesterday when I was looking at this again. It's like, okay. But again, that's the site. And the other thing, as always, and again, I'm sorry this is a little small for you to see, but and I'm in people's way. I feel odd here. So some of the things here, again, are basically we have email boxes for just about every different division, every section of the department. This one here is actually would get you, so under camping units, it's actually handled under the UDC portion of it. So that's basically the email box. If you ever have a question, that's the quickest way of getting a response. The old way used to be the telephone, but because of the number of calls that we get, these boxes actually, you get a better and faster response even though you're not specifically talking to somebody, which is more convenient with the new phones that we carry everywhere, right? So, but something just to be aware of. Again, has its own web page for it. Again, I'll be the first to admit it's a little difficult to find. So we can always go back to that. The other thing is permits. Our department, DSPS, does not handle permits. So if you're putting up a camping cabin of some sort, it is handled by your local municipality, and there is also a form that you need to fill out in order to accomplish that. Some of the other things that are also out there is, it isn't on our site again, and again, our difficult site to find, is our FAQs that we have out there. So some of the questions that I'm going to have, and again, if you have specific questions, good question, I don't want to say good questions, every question is good, right? We've always been taught that, but it may end up on here to help other people. So again, email, we really, really strongly suggest and urge you to email questions that you have. And again, at some point, if you have that question, maybe somebody other in your group also had that same question. So again, we have all kinds of different questions, different categories for them. And again, administrative and enforcement, just going to go through some of those, like how is a camping unit defined? Well, we have a couple areas where camping units are defined right now. In the application of 327 they're going to be in, but they're also going to be in our plumbing code in 381. So that's kind of some of the areas there. Looking at the next one, who is responsible for inspecting camping units? Typically it's the local jurisdiction. So your township may have a inspector, or your county may have an inspector, depending on who is the, again, authority having jurisdiction over that. So does the code apply to existing camping units? No, it does not. Again, this is not retroactive. Most codes that we have are not retroactive. I say that on one side of my mouth, and the other side of my mouth is saying life and safety issues can become retroactive, but typically not for something like this. So again, they're not retroactive. Can local authorities have a more stringent code? No, they cannot. This is a uniform code. And this is something, again, that is throughout the state, and it's enforced equally throughout the state. Again, does 327 apply to repairs of affected camping units? Answer again is no, it does not. Typically, repairs on anything are not codified typically anywhere, depending again, unless it's a life safety issue. Life safety issues can be cross connections, can be basically putting somebody's life at a risk, or health at a risk, I should say. Are municipalities required to adopt 327? Yes, they are. So, in case, and if they don't, then there's other provisions. So, can they choose to exercise, not enforce it? Yes, they can. But then again, there will be somebody in our department, a DSPS, or that would take over that jurisdiction, and that you'd end up having to contact those people again for basically inspections. And I think that's where do I obtain a permit? Again, you can get them right online, the permit application, or again, you can get them typically from your local jurisdiction. Moving on to that, what inspections are required? Typically, same thing that's required in a UDC. So you're looking at, again, you may not have a foundation though. So again, but general construction, including framing, rough electrical, rough plumbing, rough heating and air conditioning, if that's what you have in your camping unit. So, and then again, it also said basically a final inspection is also required prior to the installation, making sure that everything is good to go for you. So, any questions on those? Any questions on those questions? Moving on to plumbing then. We've got just one little section there in the code in regarding to plumbing. And it has to do with basically some exceptions. It talks about some of the things that are in the difference between 325, which is the UDC building code, compared to 327, which is the camping code. Plumbing is very limited in there. And again, I need to see this myself. Again, there are 3 sections. Again, one of the biggest concerns I think that your group had, or the camp, is that if I only want to put one fixture in there, previously to this, you were not allowed to do that because it was following the UDC code. That is something that's been codified and it's been changed. So if you want to put just one fixture in your camping cabin, you are now able to do that. The other aspects of it, one of the things I find a little I'm not quite sure what this all means, because again, if only one sink is installed, the sink shall be installed in the kitchen of the camping unit. I'm not quite sure how that works on your one-room cabins. You want to put a sink in your one-room cabin, where's the kitchen? That's been something that's been presented to me, and it's like, what? You know, how do you define a kitchen? You know, is it a counter with a sink in it? I don't know. There's a question. There's an answer I don't have for you. I don't know what that means. I find that the language was a little clumsy there at that point. So if you want to just have one sink in there, as far as I believe, as far as we're concerned, you're not required to have a kitchen. I'm not quite sure how that all works. So, kind of just an interesting tidbit of that. And again, some of the things in the language is confusing. It says that inspection's not required except for, with the exception of 327.11, and then it goes back to 327.52, which talks about inspection. So one part of the code contradicts the other part of the code. It's just, but inspections are required, just so you're all aware of that. And again, this was something for inspectors. How do I inspect it? No different than you do with for the inspections. Typically, these are UDC inspectors. There's no difference between this small home and the one that's out there that they're typically doing for places that are not in campgrounds. So, and again, plumbing and camping units basically is some of the same things that we have talked about. The other things that, according to 325, it talks about the water heater, sizing of the water heaters. Some of you are putting the water heaters in. There's some smaller ones. Some are larger ones, depending on the size of your camping cabin. So, again, if they're using the tankless type of water heater, they can be sized by the alternate that we have for these at this point. So, again, there's a little bit of there's a difference in sizing of it. Your plumber will understand all that, but it just if you want to put something in, it's basically for the anticipated use. So. 327 also again it talks about the rough-in inspection then. Again, you're looking at a rough-in and a final inspection for those. Again, I'm kind of repeating myself from the other part. Again, the question again about the kitchen sink. So if I can have a sink, it needs to be located in the kitchen. I mean, I guess that's a defined kitchen. This maybe, I don't know. Again, I'm thinking, I don't know what that means. So the other part that they put into the part of the 327 is pipe and plastic tubing. The pipe for tubing, any portion of the plumbing system of a camping unit may be flexible plastic. I urge you not to use any flexible plastic that's out there. I urge you to use, this is in our plumbing code, I urge you to use some of the materials that are available right now that are not all that more expensive, if they're expensive at all, and we have tables for it. I'd be concerned that somebody could use a flexible hose. Why would you want to do that in your building that you've spent a lot of money on to have the piping burst? The flexible tubing, a part of this, they could have put into our code the distribution piping and basically some of the services. If you're going to put something in that's not approved in Wisconsin, per se, we've gone through the testing, making sure this stuff is tested, that it's going to handle the pressures that you have on your piping system. But it is your choice, according to this, you can have any type of plastic you want. Again, I hope you would consider making sure that whatever piping is being put in there, that it's something that can withstand the pressures of your system so that you don't have, a second floor toilet pipe blowing up, which is, and I use that term very loosely because piping does basically fail, and it has this capacity of just, I'll use the term a little blow. I don't like using that term a little blowing up, but that's what it does. And you have water everywhere. And water can damage, not as quite as bad as a fire does, but water can do just as much damage as far as making everything moldy, drywall, wood, everything is not good for water. So again, urging you to use the proper material instead of what's there in there. I'm not quite sure what they meant by that when they passed that, but it was a concern at the time, and it got approved. So again, camping unit transfer tanks. I believe that's another issue that you all have concerns about. Again, transfer tanks. What happens is that we've got some code provisions, revisions coming in. I'm going to go through that in a little later, but we've basically got two types of RV transfer tanks. It's either an RV transfer tank or it's a camping unit, and it depends on what it is. This one here basically I think is the most common one that you see out there on your sites. And again, what the concern that we have is that making sure that they're not leaking, that they have good connections to them, and that they're basically maintained properly, which means proper pumping through periodic use. So some of the other things that go along with it then have DAT cap rules that also follow those. So I'm not going to get into the DAT cap rules because they're sitting there and they're going to jump all over me if I say anything wrong, right? No, I wouldn't think that would happen, but that's okay. There's a shout out to them. So, but anyhow, and again, it's just making sure that it's maintained and that it's installed properly. So there is, again, on our website, there's actually a nice little UDC thing on transfer tanks. Again, here's the website that's for it. I mentioned before, I'll mention it again, difficult to find it, but it's out there. We've got quite a few different ones for it. But it talks about the transfer tanks, what they are. Again, a camping transfer tank means, or transfer tank means a type of portable container is the thing that we're talking about here. This is a portable container used to collect and hold wastewater discharges. And again, typically all black and gray water are emptied in there. It's required to have both of them. So there's a misconception out there that, and again, not in your parks, I'm sure you don't allow it in your park because you don't want gray water all over your lands. So, but again, there's a lot of things out there that people think that gray water is okay to discharge to the surface. It is definitely not. It contains all kinds of nice little bacteria and things too. So, Again, they need to be installed according to the manufacturer's recommendation. At this point in Wisconsin, there are only 2 of them that are approved for use, the Kittleson and the TSF company. Those are the only ones that are approved in Wisconsin at this point for use. So if you have another manufacturer, or if you're knowing a manufacturer that you're using out there, I would encourage you to make sure that they get product approval for that device here in Wisconsin. Something just to be aware of. And again, we go through the making sure that they're, when you buy something, and part of our products is not only a speed bump for lots of people, but it also makes sure that, hey, if you buy this thing from somebody, it's actually a reputable piece of equipment, that it's not going to break down with UV, with the sunlight, that it's going to be able to be giving you the performance that you're expecting of it. It shouldn't collapse after a certain period of time. I know some of these do get deformed. Again, then that's perfectly understandable with the companies realize that. But again, there's just 2 of them right now that are approved, and so again, if you're using a different vendor that's providing these, you want to make sure that they actually have that approval here in Wisconsin. So again, the tank needs to be listed and labeled by national recognized agencies. One of the things that we looked at, the inlet and outlet connections are to be sized to provide adequate flow, and again, to be watertight. So they come into it. And again, a vent that terminates outside of the camping unit is located at the highest point of the tank. Some of these, there aren't vents on. You need to put a vent on. I'm going to go through a slide later on, basically showing you one that doesn't have a vent, but maybe what should be done with it. And then again, it needs to be serviced by a company that is following the regulations under 383, which is our POUTS code, making sure that whoever is picking this up. Now, I know some of you have the honey wagons, these innovative, nice little things. So wherever you're, again, making sure that you're hauling it according to the rules that are established by the Department of Natural Resources. I would assume most of you with your honey wagons are putting it to another, dumping it someplace else on site. Again, and that would be probably regulated by the Department of Natural Resources if you're not on, I'm sorry, by our department under POUTS, under 383, along with the Department of Natural Resources if it's a holding tank for that septage to be hauled someplace else. Again, if you're putting it into a municipality, the local jurisdiction is going to have all that taken care of. So, and if I'm going to be abandoning the tank, and it talks about how to abandon the tank, disconnect all the piping, sealing and disconnecting piping. I should say disconnecting piping to the tank, basically making sure the contents of the tank are taken care of, the removal and disposal of it, and again, removing the tank or removing the cover of it. Well, on most of these things, there's not a cover, so that's speaking basically of the RV tanks that can be buried. These type of tanks here right now cannot be buried, just so you're aware with these plastic ones. They're not one of them. The two that we have in Wisconsin that are approved are not basically by the owner, or I should say by the manufacturer specification, cannot be buried. They cannot handle the weight of the earth on top of them. So, and again, looking at other things that would be the use of are restricted to campgrounds permits only. So I can't have this on my private property out there or anywhere else. It again is just restricted for this use for campgrounds. Any questions on transfer tanks? Yes, sir.
Can local government make that rule more stringent?
No.
Thank you.
Are they trying?
The ordinance is written to take care of what you've already mentioned, personal property type situations, licensed campgrounds. They feel that they have more control over it, which you've just proved to me they have.
No. They basically have control over the septage of it, removing of it, transferring of it, the final resting place of it, I should say. So, yes. Any other questions on yes, sir?
They can be sunk in the ground but not covered?
They can't be covered, right? They could probably be, let me go back to some of the pictures here. Yeah, they could, like some of these you can, sorry the pictures don't show up that great, but some of them are somewhat in the ground. They just can't be covered. So the idea also is that they, I'm assuming they have some baffles in them, but you can see that most of them, if you have any of these out there, the tops are somewhat concaving in. Yes, sir.
Tom, we've just told them that over at that, you can level them, and that might mean digging into the backside. Because you're not burying them.
Oh, you're not burying them, no. Like I say, so you could bury them right up to the top. If you, I mean, cover them to the sides to help them keep them.
At capacity, so they're level.
Yeah, but the question is, what you don't want it to look at like is you don't want it to look like a walking surface.
No.
So you definitely don't want that. So that's one of the things. They're not made for that either. So I think if you put it too much in the ground, you're going to end up with somebody having a bath at some point, which would not be pleasant. So
Good rule of thumb, no dirt on top.
no dirt on top. Yeah, even though they look crappy, to say the least, they don't look the best. I'll give everybody that. So somebody here is trying to hide it with brick. I get it. They're just not very good looking. But again, they're supposed to be portable tanks. So any other questions on these? I'll move on. Then we're going to talk about things that I know about plumbing, more about than, even though I camp, I really don't, I can't say I know too much about your rules. But anyhow, plumbing is one of the things I do know about. Again, we have statutory requirements for plumbing licenses in Wisconsin. I'm going to cover some of that. Again, a plumbing license is required to install plumbing when the work is performed properly, except when work is performed properly on a property owned in a one-family dwelling that they occupy. So again, a lot of the things that are going on out there needs to be done by a licensed plumber. Again, campground installations shall be done by a properly licensed plumber with the master being responsible as required under Chapter 14506. Again, some of the exceptions, again, you can do plumbing in your own home that you own and occupy, your primary residence. That's really about it. So there are repairs though, so don't get confused between plumbing requirements and installations and repairs. So that's one of the things, again, I want to make sure that, hey, a plumbing license is not required to install a camping unit transfer tank, provided the wastewater discharge into the transfer tank is not regulated in Chapter 145. What does that mean? We're going to have a little picture of what that means. So again, none of this, the tank being located outside, the transfer tank, the piping, the flexible connections to it, not required. Even if you have an RV that somebody's using permanent in place, using permanent piping, that is not piping, that is under 145. Okay, so that would still not be considered plumbing. That would require a licensed person to do. Here's one of the ones I was talking about, the vent. These things do need a vent on them. And the problem with, if you have a vent that's right down here real close, it's going to cause odors. No ifs, ands, or buts. So if you have an installation like this, the thought here is instead of using a nice little 90, use a T and go up the side here with a vent over the top. What happens is if it's far enough away like some of the other ones, the idea is to have them low here so that the venting system in the camper itself will get a chimney effect, and you should be able to, it should be able to at least be above people's noses instead of coming back down. So, but that's typically one of the complaints that we get, it just stinks. Well, the tank stinks. Yeah, it can, no doubt. So. But again, it can be remedied by just putting a vent instead of low, putting that vent high. Again, not the greatest looking thing out there. I get it. So, but again, as far as I make it in copper, copper is beautiful, right? So, yeah, and expensive. So it won't last there very long. It'll be missing pretty quick. Yes, yes. So again, but a plumbing license is required to install a camping unit or RV transfer tank where the wastewater discharged into the transfer tank is regulated in Chapter 145. So typically, if you have plumbing leaving your camping cabin, that plumbing inside there is under Chapter 145 along with the piping leaving to it. Even if I'm going to an above ground tank. Again, this is an above ground camping unit, okay? The RV tank basically is a concrete tank that you can put in the ground, that can be put in the ground. Now, if it's put into the ground, it becomes a holding tank, and that becomes, again, becomes plumbing, just so we're aware of that. And that may fall into the guidelines of chapter, or I should say of SPS 383 when it comes to a holding tank with the other bells and whistles that are required for it, which typically is just nothing more than a float in there for an alarm just so that people know when it's full. So again, depending on what you're doing, something like this, again, the plumbing inside this is covered under chapter 145 along with the piping leaf to it. You really can't install a flexible pipe to this, as this is not a, again, it is not an RV per se. So, any questions on that? Again, I'm just bringing little. We don't see, of course, we don't have pictures of RV transfer tanks because they're all below ground. I can show you a picture of grass if you like, but that's kind of how it is with those. So if you have permanent sites, you may want to go with something larger, or however that works. So again, one of those that these type of tanks again too, or I should say anything that's serving this type of a tank can be above, but it would be under chapter 145 though, just so we're again on the same page with that. And then we look at definitions associated with campgrounds, and that's where I'm getting the camping unit, basically the camping transfer tank, which is the black one that we've been showing, and then there's the RV transfer tank, which is the one that basically is buried, typically again under 145, required to be installed by a plumber. So these are, as you can see, these are actually new sections in our plumbing code. 381 is our definitions. It's a whole chapter just on definitions itself for plumbing. 382 is the plumbing code itself. So that's where these are now appearing. And again, SPS 380, 381. Moving on to more again, we have all kinds of different other ones that are in there. Again, campground, recreational vehicle park, drain system, sanitary. We look at campground park water supplies. And then we also have a definition of there in seasonal. Now, the seasonal one may be changing. So April 15th through October 31st for the purpose. Does that mean your park has to close at October 31st? And that's one of the problems that we've had with some of these definitions. Some people are camping well into fall beyond October 31st. Does that mean you have to shut your place down? This kind of says if it's a seasonal, you may have to shut your parts of your thing down. Again, nobody's telling you have to do this. It's just that we have to change this code to be more in line what seasonal is. Since I have a captive audience, what is the latest of around that you have your campgrounds open? Do you have some available in November? Nobody has anything available in November. So
Yeah, Eric has them all year round, but
Grand Valley does.
Grand Valley is open until late November.
I think through hunting season, so.
yeah, that's kind of what we've been thinking too, because there's a ton of people that go out there to go camping in hunting season, and when again, deer hunting is in late November. Is that that's a number that we should be changing? That may be something that we need to look at. Again, typically frost is not in the ground, so it's not causing problems with heave of anything else. That we should still be able to get water. I'm assuming at some point you should be able to get water, but maybe not. I know I've camped one time on Halloween and everything froze up, except for my camper. Couldn't get rid of the water. The water line was froze. It was one of those nice long winters. So again, we can be looking at a different number there, where our code is going to be opened, and it's one of the things that we have been debating on when the camping season starts. So is April 15th a good day? Should we be moving that? Typically your parks are open April 15th through November. I mean, it's a good. We're looking at good round numbers. Sometimes what happens is that we pick numbers and we haven't asked the industry, are these good numbers for you? So if we be looking at late November, it might be helping you out then. Okay. Some of the other things that we have. So when you have your addition on to your campground, it does require a state level plan review for water supplies and for drains if you're putting them in. A lot of the times what happens is that and I don't like to get the term, but basically you're in the process of adding on without the proper approvals. So again, we do have an approval process for campgrounds. And again, it is spelled out in this nice little brochure that we actually have on our website someplace. We'll need to get that a little bit more clarified. This is a little help that is available out there. It kind of tells you more than you ever wanted to know about plumbing in your campground. But it's there to be a help. There are some small little things in here. Again, I'm sorry you can't read them. Basically, it talks about any questions that you actually ever have for plumbing and anything else. We also have a website for that, or I should say an email box for that. And again, typically we answer those emails every day. You won't get a quick answer right here, right now, because again, limited staff. But typically, we like to respond. And again, that's one of the rules that I have set up for my staff, is that they will be answered every day at some point. So, but again, it's something that's out there. What else we have up here? I've got to switch around. Again, talking about, again, our requirement, 38220. Again, 382 is the plumbing code. And again, if you have a POUTS system, septic system, you need to have that through requirements in 383. So this is what the bottom of our form looks like. This is the fee that's required for campgrounds for us to review the review. And you can see if you've got 1 to 25 sites, we have a $300 review fee for that purpose. So. Typically what happens is that that also can include, with that $300, you can end up with your sanitary dump station. Again, it would also take care of the exterior sanitary water service and the exterior sanitary sewer. So again, depending on what you're doing, you may want to make sure that you check all those boxes and have whoever's submitting it, even though you may not have an intention of putting it in today, but you can get approval, and these approvals are good for 2 years. So if you're thinking about those type of things, because the fee is all the same is what it comes down to. So again, if you're just having water out there, it's a $300 fee, but if you want to have sewer at some point, and you wait, that'd be another $300 fee, and if you want to have basically a dump station put in, be another $300 fee. So you might want to just make sure that you check them all at the same time for the plan review on it. So. And again, we want to make sure that when we go out there and make inspections, we want to make sure that we're again, the minimum above surface is 4 inches. So something to be concerned about. These are not supposed to be floor drains or roof or area drains out there. Okay, so again, it would be in your benefit to make sure it's not, because it's going to just inundate your sewage systems. Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea how long the state plan review was taking at this time?
I'm glad you asked that question. We're working on it. How's that sound? We've had a computer change that delayed us last year. So if any of you had plans that you were waiting for us for last year, I will be the first to admit it was awful. So right now, if you were to submit a plan today, we are looking possibly at the end of March right now. So we're really gotten some improvements on it.
For a couple of weeks, so I should be seeing that pretty soon.
Oh, you're waiting on one? Yes, you should be seeing it in a couple of weeks, depending on if we can approve it. So campgrounds, what happens is that they're not that complicated. They're complicated enough because of the engineering behind the water supply system, and I'm going to go through that a little bit too, on what we're looking for, why things have to work. But yeah, you should be getting it. Hopefully, you're going to get it real soon. I would hope. If you let me know what it is, I can find out what's going on with it. So again, these are kind of the things that we're looking at, making sure that, again, at the end, we've come to many of these campgrounds, and again, they get knocked off. You know, your high schooler that's mowing the lawn out there really doesn't want to mow around these things. Once they get bumped off a little bit, they're really can go right over the top of them when they're not there. Again, acts as a area drain out there, causing your septic systems. And especially if you got a ton of them out there, it's a lot of excess water that's going in there. They are supposed to be plugged when they're not in use. I'm not sure anybody's doing that, but that's the idea. I would recommend that you do because campgrounds are full of kids. They have great times out there. They have these nice little softballs. They fit perfectly in those 4-inch pipe, by the way. So, and if they don't know what the 4-inch pipe is, it can also become a spot for golfing. So just something also to be aware of. You probably have seen it all in these, I would assume, on all these type of things. So something just to be concerned about. The other part is, again, the basic water requirements. Again, picture of one here. This has changed. Part of the requirements have changed on the heights of these. Some of the aspects of it, and I know that is a huge concern on some of these not providing enough water. And again, part of the issue here for this one here is the top. These valves now have to be 18 inches off the ground. Our plumbing code at one time said 12 inches. DATCAP's code said 18 inches. We've got on the same page. So so you did it according to the plumbing code for just a little while, and DATCAP gave us a call. It's like, so we've straightened that out. So moving on with it, cross-connection control for them. Cross-connection control is a notorious problem for campgrounds. What happens is that this device that up here runs about $3. I get it. But what happens is that the guy that hooks up to it with the hose comes off with the hose. And next thing you know, it's gone. Again, but the problem is when we come out and do an inspection, we'll see that, oh, by the way, I can see 100 of them that don't have them on. Now you do 100 times $3, it's like, yeah. Now adding, just so we're all on the same page, adding this on does not require a plumbing license. This is a repair basically done to it. One of the things I want you to notice about this one here is the little side bolt that's on there. And again, these are 1011s that we look for. 1052s that are down there are 3 times the cost typically. They do the same function. With the 1052 down here, the difference between this one and this one here is I can leave a hose on this one, and it should not freeze. The hose is supposed to drain out after the water's off. But again, this is the one that we see notoriously out there. These are other backflow devices that are out there that we also look at. Again, looking at the types, we have high hazard and we have low hazard. Some of these low hazard devices we're looking for inside your convenience stores, your soda dispensers, your slushy machines, some of your coffee makers, some of your juice needs to have backflow devices on. And again, that's typically can be done with a 1012. They're not the most expensive, but they have to be there. So, and each individual device needs a backflow device that's on there. So other than that, I'm just trying to think if there's the next one here. Typically, this is one that we're looking for if you have an irrigation system to take care of your lawn. Typically, people are putting pressure vacuum breakers in. The other one that they're going to be looking for is this one right here, the ASSE 1014, making sure that those if you have a hand shower, which if most showers right now, you have to at least have one handicap accessible one. That one with the hand shower, actually with the hose, actually has to have a backflow device on it. So those are another thing that we're looking for. It's a 10, again, that one is a 1014. It's just a small little device that goes between the hose and the shower head up on top. Then again, if you have, depending on the age of your campground. So again, getting back to the 18 inches, you can see this little device here. This little device here right now is a break-off bolt. Get rid of those. So if you get this one here, you might want to make sure that you have a bolt in there that you can use an Allen wrench on and turn those in. You can order them, a mess of these that way. But if you take this thing off, it's good for one time. That's it. You don't want to use this type. If you're going to use this type, I would suggest that you just get rid of the bolt and lose it. It's not required that you have these things bolted on. But if you turn that one tight, it breaks off, and now what happens? If you want to get that off, you're not only replacing that device, you're replacing the faucet. So something to just to be aware of. Again, and you can get them with the Allen wrench on them. And if you don't get them with the Allen wrench on them, bolt, I should say, what happens is you're going to lose them by just about every other one of your campers that come in that remove that hose, because the part there is that they can really crank their hose on, and the next thing you know, this all comes off, and people really, I don't think people honestly think about it. It's just there, and now you've lost it. Now it's going to cost you another $3 at some point, and your time to go out there and look at it. So there's a lot of aggravation with these darn things. The other aspect of it is that I tell you to take the bolt off, because to winterize these are really a pain in the butt. They have a little excursion on the bottom that you actually have to hold in order to blow these things out. So it's kind of a real pain to drain them out. So at which point, I would assume most of you are removing them in the wintertime. And to remove them, again, it's so much easier to remove them with that Allen wrench than anything else. There is a new style that's out there. That's this faucet right here that it has it built in. It's a little more than $3 though, so just so you're aware of that. But that's also available. It's something that's actually new within the last couple of years that actually has a 10, 11. What we look at is numbers on things, and I'm spouting you numbers. This one here basically is a 1011 device, which means it's approved by the ASSE, which is American Society of Sanitary Engineers. It meets a standard of 1011, which says that it's equivalent for backflow protection for certain types of pressures and certain types of back pressures. That's what we look for. So that's what's required according to our plumbing code. Yes, sir.
Cost difference between that other one on the bottom is about $10, $11. But the nice thing with that one on the bottom is you never have to worry about the camper taking it screwed right in. So the only problem with those is sometimes the seats on the top after winter, sometimes they stick, and you have to take it apart and just release it a little bit. But by and far that, for the money, and not to worry about replacing all your backflow preventers on the faucets because your campers took them off for whatever reason. It's a good investment. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree, but it's a lot more money. So
Well,
you're talking a campsite, but if you replace them one at a time, when they, however you want to do it, but they're, you got 300 of those, it could add up, but it's depending on what you want to do. This is a continuous maintenance. But like I say, I think if you bolt them down, you can. Yeah, and like you're saying is that there's a little topper in here. And basically, it's a float, and that's what the backflow device is about. So the idea here is what does the backflow device do? So basically, it prevents back siphonage. So what can happen in any building anywhere in the country? We can have a fire next door, for instance. I lived in the city of Hayward when we had a major fire in downtown. It took out a motel, a century-old motel at one point. It took 11 fire departments. It completely sucked dry our water supply system of the city. Then went over to the nearby pond, sucked that dry prior to putting this fire out. It finally took a piece of equipment to go out there and take it down, and then they had to actually get more water through tankers from a local lake. So what happened when the pressure went down in the city of Hayward is that anything higher than where they were pulling it out is being sucked back in. And that's how it all works. So that's where cross connections happen. It was really interesting on TV this last week. You saw that people thought it was real funny somewhere in Italy that they were getting wine out of their faucets. Those are cross connections. But any place that you actually have a head pressure, which is something higher, a water supply higher, and I lose pressure low, it actually brings the water level down. When that water is displaced at something high, it creates vacuum. And that's what the concern that we have with all of these. If I create a vacuum and I'm sucking debris into the plumbing systems, I'm going to make people sick and I may kill them. And there's a lot of known facts about all these. That's why these are here. That's what a backflow device does. So sometimes people say, well, it was a cross-connection device. So it's like, well, yeah, you're right. Only a dummy would cross-connect between hot and cold water. It's basically a cross connection between a potable source, a drinking water, and a non-drinking water source. That's what these devices do, and that's why they're important. That's why we look for them. These little devices are life safety issues. Those are things that we take very serious. So even though it seems like it's a real pain in the butt for these things, these are, again, our life safety issues, and health of people are really affected by these when they're not in place. And again, I don't want to say the perfect storm has to happen, but it can be as simple as a fire next door in a municipality, or it could be somebody's working on the well. The well happened to lose the check valve where you're at. It sucks everything back down because you've lost power. It will draw water out of all these hoses throughout your campground into your well, which can contaminate your well. So again, a lot more money would be invested in something on cleaning those up. But that's what they do. So. Then we're going to get back to, this is one of the other things that we see are these nice little Y connections. Again, Y connections are not allowed in campgrounds. There's specific reasons for them because every individual outlet has to have a backflow device. And as I mentioned before, hose bibs. Every hose bib is a potential high hazard risk. So every hose bib has to have a device on it. So if I go to here, that means this is a hose. I have to have a device here in order for this to be somewhat possible. But again, what happens is I can't put that device on here because this device here has certain stipulations. It can only be allowed to be on continuous pressure for 12 hours. So some of you probably have seen some of these where they're on, except for the exception for campgrounds, but that's the end part. That would be to use for the campground. Some of you probably noticed that where somebody will put one of these on and the water is blowing out of this thing all over the place. That's because the seals in these have gone because they're not made for continuous pressure, except we have that provision for campgrounds. That's the only place that these are allowed to have more than 12 hours of continuous pressure. So in order for me to put one before here, I'd have to have one here, but this one again is not part of the campground association. A part of it, this one here is. Most of these are also now with the new lead laws, do not make the lead content for it. So basically you're leaching lead into the water supplies. And again, the other part that actually adds on to it is the sizing of it. The second that I start manifolding these things out, and we've seen a lot of creative things out there, start manifolding these things out, you're losing pressure because you don't have enough size for the requirements for the water, which again is going to cause back siphonage on certain areas. Again, the reason why these are not allowed.
So if the camper itself has a backflow preventer on, and I'm sure everybody in the room is gonna say the same thing. If the camper has it on his hose, whatever he does after his hose is his responsibility, is it not?
If he has an outside faucet on his camper.
He has outside faucet, yeah, anything beyond that is
He can do
theirs.
whatever he wants.
Yes, except for the Ys here, yes. For instance, if they wanted to put a Y,
I mean, no disrespect, but everybody in the room also knows that, a gentleman wants to wash off the kid's feet before he goes in the trailer. He might want to wash off the trailer, so to speak. He might want to, there's a whole number of reasons. And so the question comes up is, I understand, the cross-contamination, but I don't understand it's the what if the well went down, what if that this, what if that didn't. I don't see the data supporting how many people have been affected by cross-contamination. I know it only takes one, but.
On what given day?
Pick a day.
I guess from a campground owner's perspective, where does our responsibility end or start? I mean, yeah, we're responsibility for the faucet, the backflow preventer on the faucet. Are we responsible for the camper owner's hose and he's hooking up to our faucet? And on the other end of that hose, are we responsible for his water system on his camper?
You're responsible to provide proper water to your tenants. So what they do on your property can affect the neighbor. also. But I'm just to,
Yeah, but if I have a backflow preventer on my faucet, and he's putting his hose on it, am I responsible for his hose to his camper?
no.
That's
So,
what I'm looking for.
so basically what it comes down to is if you want to use these on the end of their hose. Not at the hose, not at the connection,
Not the backflow.
not here.
No, I would never want to do that.
But that's what we see. So again, if you want to use it at the end of on end of this hose here, wherever this is going to the end of that hose, they want to put something on because they want to put something on to wash the dog off or wash the side of the camper on. That would be theirs. Yes, sir.
So I'm gonna raise a question today. Can we get this in writing that'll put every campground owner at ease, especially in this room and out there, that today you said that it is okay for that to happen?
In certain spots. That's what the whole thing is. Not
You
that's.
just-
I'm saying you cannot use it
At the end
here.
of the hose.
Yeah, they can't use it here.
That's been everybody's nightmare.
I know.
Is this cross-contamination. So can we today, at the end of this class, get something in writing from DSPS that says, at the end of the hose, it's their responsibility? Or at the connection, it's their responsibility?
Absolutely not. So how's that? But
This question came up literally years ago.
all right. Well, again, my point is this is the spot we see them, right? The first connection here is where we see them. So if you have owners,
If we don't have them at that point, we're not responsible for our customers' hoses.
I can't tell you what you're responsible for or not what, but plumbing wise, okay, liability wise, I mean, I don't want to turn around and say, well, this guy said you're not responsible. Yeah, I can't do that.
Because I can't walk up to every camper that comes in and walk around their camper and say, you got a hose running here. I can't inspect how they're hooking up their camper.
You know, we all have particular wipes,
Sure.
you know, and they don't want that sand in that camper,
I don't.
you know?
But like I said, that's where this comes in. So again, if what we're seeing is that there's only one faucet up here, and now you're hooking up 5 campers to it. That's what we're saying. No, you can't do that. But that's what we're seeing. So if they want to put that, I mean, my camper that I have has got a outside hose bib on it. I mean, I don't know why, but it's really nice. But if I want to put a Y connection at the end of my hose before I connect it to my camper, yes, we don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
So the code says no Ys.
No Ys, this is where we want it, right here. This is what we're talking about.
Okay, maybe it could be.
So we may have to clarify
Yes,
where
it's
we
the
need them.
whole- Every campground owner in the state of Wisconsin is out on their edge of the seat, and I'm the guinea pig putting it out there. But I will say this, and then that's fine, but I will say this, that if it was just tweaked a little bit, I think you would have all these campground owners going, you know?
Yeah. But baby, so this is the
So
misunderstanding.
maybe at the end of the day, we'll come out with this piece of paper.
We will try to clarify it though, if that's where the question comes in.
Oh, okay.
So, but again, this is the spot that we're concerned about.
Okay, great.
This is where, because at the end of the hose, if somebody is washing a dog up there and they're trying to get water in the house, somebody's going to yell at them out there to turn that faucet off.
Absolutely.
Compared to somebody having 5 of these going on at the same time, it's like I can't get any water. That's the point. And the point that we're also making is that the number that we put here affects the pressure that's in the campground because typically it's not installed. This tree just keeps getting added on and on and on over the years. I get it. But you know, if this was put in from day one, you're talking about a whole lot of GPM through here. Yes, sir.
How long does the hose have to be? Because I've seen the,
That's where the problem comes in. It's like, so if that hose now is taking it, so if I'm putting a hose here, that much of a hose, and I'm putting a Y connector and I'm taking off to this camper and that camper, no, not allowed.
they're not doing it.
No, but
They're
we're
doing
not-
one to the trailer and one for the regular hose to water their garden or to water
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah,
it's not servicing 2 campers, it's
I
servicing
see,
one
that's
site.
where the problem is.
yes, it is.
The problem is, in the old days, when you had a camper and you had one pedestal and it fed 5 sites,
That doesn't.
that's what the state's looking at.
Yep.
And so, you know, okay, I'll put my hose on here, I'll put my hose on here, yeah, you got a problem. You're gonna suck that baby down and nobody has any pressure.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you had a Y, you could suck out of one camper, go through the Y to the other camper. That's not what we got going here.
But
We
that's-
got one pedestal, one plumbing thing, one trailer. The guy's got 2 hoses. One goes to his trailer, the other one he goes to to wash his trailer. He's not sharing it with the next guy. That's what the problem is, so that, you play the game, okay, we put a 12-inch hose on there, just to play the game with the plumbing department. It says, okay, you gotta have one thing on there. I'm gonna put the Y on it, I'm still gonna need my trailer and my hose to wash the trailer with. The state's concern is when you feed two trailers.
Correct.
The same thing.
That's right.
And that's where, if you have, it should be written, you could have that Y if it's only for that camping unit.
For that
You
site.
cannot share the Y with more than one camper. That would solve the problem. But the way it's written now, you just say, I don't want it. Well, it doesn't make any sense if it's the same house. You know?
Well, the ones
You know
that,
what I'm saying?
to be honest, the ones that we've seen has been for this trailer, that trailer, and everything else.
Yeah, and we would,
Yeah.
we understand, we would
Yeah.
all agree.
I don't think we have any here
One
with that.
spigot,
Yeah.
one trailer.
Yep.
Okay? That's all we gotta do, is just define it that way, instead of, the inspectors are coming out and saying, you can't have that, you can't have that, you can't have that. Well, buddy, it's the same trailer.
Yeah.
Anybody
That's
who
what
walks
the
away from.
Department of Plumbing says we can't have it. I understand why you don't want it,
Yeah.
under that circumstance.
Yeah, we haven't, to be honest, I have never seen what you're talking about, ever, on the number of campgrounds I've been on to.
What's that?
I bet you half my sites got a Y because they want a second hose to do something.
Basically, the long-term people,
Yeah, the
right?
season.
Yes, the seasonal people, yes.
I've seen dailies pull in and put that Y on because they want to wash up the kids' feet. They have, whatever, just to hose off.
Yeah. I guess then maybe we'd have to come to an understanding. So maybe I don't want to see this kind of because that's going to confuse everybody, that much of a hose to put a Y on. Why can't it be on the long one going to it? Why can't it be right there? Any reason?
What's the right distance then?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying about put it away from the pedestal so it's clearly visible that it's feeding one camper.
It's laying on the ground, you just have 12 inches, you can attach it to the post.
What difference if they actually do it at the other end then?
So what's the distance, how long does it have to be then? Does
I
it
don't-
have to be 6.5 feet?
Well, that's why I'm trying to come up with a compromise, right?
So,
Here's the compromise, guys, here's the compromise. How many people have new sites that only put one spigot on it? I haven't put one spigot on in 20 years. I come up, and I put a T on the starter, 2 ball valves, I'm done. Now I don't need that damn Y on there.
But that's saying that you have it for each site. Where typically what we were seeing is that you may have a water supply that's going to feed four units, right?
And I agree with you 100%. If it's feed 4, it should be. If you're gonna feed 4, put a whole bunch of T's on that baby, and have 4 bell valves on there, and you're done.
And then the piping needs to be sized for that. The campground needs to be sized for 4.
Which will never happen, because the old park's got a half-inch line, the new park maybe 3/4, and you shouldn't be running 4 trailers off of 3/4.
That's what I'm saying. That's what we find.
That's the part that's old.
Yes, but that's the part that we have problems with.
That's the part that's old, and I understand what you're saying.
Yep. So, but basically, if you're adding another hose bib, it requires plan review because we're looking for water supplies. Remember the one, and again, just remember, I didn't write this code, but it's the one, but I have to enforce it.
yeah, right, you're the enforcer, so we're trying to get somewhere. Is there any way that the campground industry could have a seat at your table?
See that, what table?
When you come for code reviews, when it comes to the plumbing part?
You'd have to apply for it. I don't make decisions who sits at our table.
I mean,
But
other-
again, we do have, and
other
I'm-
parts of the state work with us.
But what happens is that anytime that anybody has any input to any code change, there's availability right on our website right now to make a suggestion. And those suggestions are brought before each code committee, just so you're aware of it also. I'm going to talk about some of the other changes here, but I wanted to, but go ahead.
But again, we're campground owners.
Yep.
We put our life and soul in every penny that we have into our campground.
Sure.
The last thing that we want is to hurt people.
Sure.
So
I believe that, yes.
So we would not be wanting to hurt people. We're just looking for clarification on simplistic rules.
Again, we do have, I don't people above me get to decide who is on a code council. For you to sit on our code council, you'd be bored to death on plumbing, to say the least, unless it's dealing with your campground.
Just the campground portion of it.
But the campground, well, there's not a campground portion, and that's what I'm going to show you in a minute. So, but we can, again, suggestions on anything that we have for code, we're more than happy to answer or basically address. Some of these, again, the why thing compared to, thinking, again, my belief was this is hook up additional ones because that's what we've been seeing for years and years and years. And that's one of the reasons, and with that, I want to go through why we have also additional problems with it, is because of the sizing. So again, this one here, for instance, 3/4 inch, it's got 4 of them on there. That's 60, again, we do everything in calculations, again, that talk about the boring part, about the stuff that we know about and why it doesn't, it finds out that you're trying to provide water to your customers. We get that. We don't, there's no way that we're ever trying to imply that you're not trying to do the right thing, ever. It's just that what happens is that, like anything else, we can't be experts in everything. So what we do here is that, hey, when you start adding devices onto these supplies, you're robbing from somebody out somewhere else if it's not done properly. Or wherever the elevation difference is. Some of your campgrounds are just on these fabulous pieces of property, gorgeous views, right? But that high water up there is going to suffer from somebody down here that has 4 of these going on. He's not going to get the water up there. That's what we do with our calculations, and those are the things that we look for. But it looks like, depending on the size of your piping system that's down there. Some of the old stuff that's in there and some of the new stuff that we're finding is that, people, what they're burying is they think that, well, that's good enough. Well, what are the calculations that provide it to us? And again, we look at for this one here, I got 12 gallons a minute that I need here. What is your pump going to deliver? Your pump is delivering a whole lot more than that, but now you start, okay, you've got 4 at these sites and you have 40 of these. That's a lot of water. That's a lot of water that you may need only for a split second, 1 day a week, right? Yes, sir.
It seems like it's more if you were protecting households. These are our customers. They're gonna vote by coming back or not coming back based on what we deliver to them. And some sites don't have any water.
Right.
And so to micromanage our customers to make sure they get whatever a household is supposed to get for water seems like that's not your job.
But it's basically your customers are still our citizens of the state that we're
But
protecting.
it's not a health and safety thing if they don't get enough water.
Well, it does if you're opening up the faucets and it's sucking someplace else because somebody doesn't have that backflow device on.
Well, that's the backflow preventer though. That's not the size of the pipe.
It is the size of the pipe. The size of the pipe can be, you can lose pressure on your size of the pipe depending on how many spigots are in here. So somebody's holding here, if nobody's using water, you go to the furthest one, you're gonna get a ton of water out there. People are using the water, you open up that same spigot, are you getting the same amount? You need, again, looking at sizing differences here, there are different pressures that are required for this. Again, we're looking at 12 gallons per minute that's coming just out of this one. But the top one needs to have at least 8 pounds of pressure at it. That's a given throughout the industry, throughout the country, 8 pounds. 8 pounds of pressure is not a whole lot. If you think about this building here, your shower this morning is running about 70 pounds of pressure. This is 8, okay? So we do have taken a lot of these things into consideration in the engineering for these. So again, looking at some of this is the stuff we get to look at every day. Basically how it's sized, what the gallons per minute is, what your GPM requirements are, what your pressure losses are. So if you're using a lot of water at some time, you're getting friction loss on the small piping. For instance, on that one there, at an 1.5 inch pipe, if that's my main out there, at 60 gallons a minute, I'm losing approximately 60 psi, which means if my pump is only running 40, 60, I'm not getting any water at the furthest one, if things are correct. Or I'm not getting my 8 pounds of pressure. The devices, our backflow devices, only work if they have proper pressure at them. That's the other thing that we're looking at, and that's why we look at the pressures. That's why it's important for us. Yes, sir.
I guess I'm not bringing this back, but I just want one little clarification. So if we have one site, one camper, one spigot, one backflow preventer, we're not sharing, among other campers with one spigot, you know, it's 1-1-1.
Right?
They put a hose on it, they hook it up, and right before they hook it up to their camper, they put a splitter on it. That's where I'm concerned in regards to how can I police that?
Yes. Well, that is the problem. I mean, you're going to have, I would bet that you're going to have at that same site, if it's a seasonal site, they're going to have a garden. And they're going to have grass that they're going to, you know, and they may mow their own grass there. I've seen many of these, right? So depending on what they're doing,
But
you
I
can
don't-
end
I
up,
don't believe anybody here has one riser with a dozen splitters on it. I don't believe anybody in this room has that. That's an extreme, what I'm going back to is one spigot, one camper, one site. I guess that's where the major concern is, and if our customer puts on a splitter on his end towards his camper, you know, that's where we're stuck.
yeah, and again, we're not going to have too many problems with that.
In his defense of
Yeah.
that comment,
Yeah.
everybody in this room comes to this convention to be educated.
Yes.
There is a
yes,
great
yes.
deal, unfortunately, of our industry that doesn't belong to this association that they have to deal with on an everyday level, and are doing exactly what you were just describing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's why we're having this meeting, to give input, so we can correct some of these miscommunications.
Exactly. Again, I just want to get a little clarification. So,
Certainly.
The discussion went in multiple areas.
Well, again, that's where we're moving past. We're past that already. Obviously, it's a subject that's near and dear. I get it.
In writing. At the end of the day.
I got an email that tells me that, but they didn't go with it.
So basically, what we look at for just sizing, again, we look at basically the water demand. We're looking at the lowest pressure at the source. We look at segments, how long they are, and we're looking at elevation differences. That affects all your water pressure, and that's what we look at for all campgrounds. We look at the furthest away from the water source in order to make sure that we're sizing these properly. That ensures us, and again, basically at this one here, I need a minimum of 8. I'm getting 16 at there right now. We're good to go. That's what it comes down to. So that's kind of what we do for plan review for these. And it takes some time. If you look at some of your large sites, it takes some time to do this. Not only that, it trains the plumber to realize that, hey, we needed segmented loss on here. Because the other one, what happens is, we have two ways of sizing this. It's either segmented loss, or we have another, which basically covers all, which is going to make your pipe sizes almost 1.5 times, again, larger. So segmented loss works for you for this purpose. So again, taking into account campgrounds type of things. Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, that's utopia there, you know, I mean, a lot of parks were built long before these.
I know that.
came into place. And, you know, the one thing that some people don't talk about is, okay, you got, let's say, undersized piping, it doesn't mean you can't put it into a storage tank halfway in and put a booster pump on it. And just like the power company does, when they run long runs, they boost it up on a transformer. You do the same thing with water. You know, if you got a problem with elevation, you can pump up there and then put a pressure pump and maintain 60 pounds if you want to. But nobody ever talks about that stuff.
Except for today, because we're going to talk about that. So again, looking at, again, going past, again, we talked about segmented loss. So I'm going to get past through that. Here's we're talking about is pressure to tanks, right? This is not a pressure tank though. This is a gravity tank.
Right, and you put a pump on it.
You put a pump on that.
Right.
You're not going to want to hear what I have to say about these. This water that's in here right now, it requires plan review for it, for one, okay? The other thing is, and why we require plan review is because of, well, again, it's in the campground, for one. Second thing, we look at water quality in here. Department of Natural Resources has determined that anytime that and again, we have these throughout the state, not just campgrounds, we have them in buildings like this, or larger buildings within cities. We have them at schools, because our infrastructure that you've heard about is not as good as it was, but we're using a lot more water, which means that buildings like this sometimes may have to have it. I'm not saying this one does, but you have to have a water supply. And sometimes the water supply coming off from the state highway, like back over here, is Highway 10. The DOT, Department of Transportation, is not going to let you rip up that road to bring a new water supply into a building like this. they're going to say you're going to have to go to Plan B. Plan B sometimes is a tank like this that you actually put a booster pump in, but you can't put a booster pump in if I don't have the supply. So I'm going to put it in a gravity tank. That's what this is, a gravity tank. So you're basically filling this as slow as you, all day long, just flowing that tank unless there's a fill valve or something that's shutting it off. And at some point when you get the demand, the other side's going to kick it on and you're going to get all the water that you need. The problem with that is the Department of Natural Resources has determined that we look at, or again, and also we look at, once you put water in a container like this, we have specific requirements in our plumbing code talks about water use for intended use and where the water quality has to come from. So if I'm going to be doing drinking, cooking, or whatever else, it has to come from an NR 811 or 812 source. That's either a private well source or that's a municipal source, okay? What it comes down to is if you use a tank, the Department of Natural Resources is now saying that is no longer an 811 or 812 source. So in order to maintain that 811 or 812 source, you have to submit plans to our department to determine what the capacity of that tank is and what's the turnover rate of that tank. So most municipalities, for instance, their water is chlorinated. So again, we can have a turnover rate of that. What we don't want is too large of tanks. For the reason is residency of time. We are running into huge issues of residency time in plumbing right now. It's causing other problems throughout the state, throughout the country as far as that goes. So what happens here is that it has to come in, but now it's going to have to be disinfected if you're having too large of a tank in. And part of that is basically something like this is what we look for. So again, you're coming in, you're coming in with your water supply, you're dumping it into a tank, you're either even having a mechanical device in there for the float, coming out of it, going and distributing it to where you have to be. But in between time, you're also recirculating it, and you are chlorinating, putting a small little chlorinator on there. Or you may be using ultraviolet. You need to make sure that this water supply that's in here is going to be kept as a wholesome supply. Once we do this, this is now an 811 and 812 source that's approved by the Department of Natural Resources also. You just can't put that, I just can't put that tank in there like that and without any special precautions or any other things that go into it. Again, it's a quick fix. It gives you the water supply that you want typically in the past, but slowly we're finding that, hey, this is a much simpler type of system to put in. It's not that much more expensive than what you're doing. You're probably doing all this right now except for chlorination. So
when you chlorinate, any more sampling need to be done when you do that?
you need to sample it periodically to make sure that your chlorine levels are where you want it to be.
Any sampling that needs to be done for the state level,
Well,
other than that annual?
Your annual, that's all we were looking for. We're putting the onus on this, on you, the owner, making sure that you're providing a wholesome product. That's basically what it comes down to. Our department will come out here, inspect this, making sure it's installed properly, and everything looks good, and then we basically turn it over. So, yes, sir.
Well, okay, that's a gravity system. I understand.
This is a gravity system, yes.
Yeah, but then you can, you know what an ansel tank is.
Yes.
You can put 10 of those in a room if you want to, and they're all sealed. You wouldn't have to deal with chlorination.
That's correct.
You have another option.
The problem that we're seeing with that, though, is there's other issues right now that are throughout the state with the being able to flush those out, keep them clean.
We only had 1 million of them in the state.
And we're losing people through Legionella. That's the problem with it. Again, it has to do everything with residency time. Now, you look at your campground, if this is a 1,000-gallon tank, you know, and if you have your home, let's say, tied to the same thing, what's going on with this water come winter? Obviously, you don't want that 1,000 gallons sitting there. You're going to drain it out. You're going to do something. You know, so it's the same. But the problem, if you have the pneumatic tanks, what are you doing with those? Those are going to be filled with water all the time unless you make provision up front.
But again, we're a campground.
Yes.
We blow out, we close, all that water disappears. You know, that's where the code sometimes gets cloudy because everybody assumes it's connected to a house and you're using it year round. But that's not our world. Our world is 4 months.
Well, yes.
More water's turning fast.
But there's some campgrounds that also have these camping cabins that are open year round. And that's where the water is also being from here. And then it's typically weekend use. And so we're having issues with We're having issues with those. And the problem with the issues is Legionella. So the residency in these things. And again, because of, I mean, again, I'm not sure any well in Wisconsin that doesn't have some kind of issue with it, either with iron bacteria or any of that sort, that needs to be cleaned out periodically. That's where these tanks here are translucent. You're going to want to clean them because, you know, and you want to make sure that they're not in the open anywhere. Translucent tanks out in nature itself are going to turn green, and people are going to wonder what you're doing with that water. Oh, you're drinking that. Not a good thing. So you want to make sure that it's behind locked doors so that somebody can't touch it either. So, any other questions on something like that? Again, but you can use the pneumatic tanks. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So,
What about, I know this is outside the box, but what about a small tower system? Do you have any campgrounds went down that road?
not that I'm aware of a tower.
Small tower.
Yeah. I would assume that this would be a whole lot less expensive, but
Yeah.
not saying that they can't.
Evergreen on it.
Jesus.
Yes, you could go to a tower.
You know, a couple 100 feet, just a small one.
Well, you know, you say that, but if you drive by some of the old milk factories that are alongside the road, you see the stainless steel towers there. A lot of those are now water towers. So, I mean, it's not the mushroom-shaped one that you think about, you know, so they use other ones, you know, that can have 10, 15, 20,000 gallons. All stainless steel, so, but again, something to look at. Those fall under other aspects of having to have maintenance and cleaning and all the other protocols, so. Then I want to talk about just some fish cleaning stations. So just again, backflow devices for those. And again, I'm not sure how close, from my angle, the picture doesn't show up at all. But what these here, this is a backflow device here. You can see that's a 1001. That's basically, it needs to be 6 inches above the flood level rim. That's this here. That is not feeding these hoses. That's basically feeding a flush within the rim of that. These hoses here, when you have these hoses, they don't need another backflow device on them, but they have to be at least 1 inch, one left to spring, I'll use that term, left to spring, they have to be at least 1 inch above the flood level rim. Otherwise, if you don't have a hose on it, you're good to go on most of these. Here's another picture of they have the rubber hoses coming from the ceiling. Again, backflow device would be required on those. Either wherever the connection is or wherever you're turning this thing on and off. I'm not sure how that one actually, because I didn't get to see what they're doing to the top of it, but it may be something that's done at the side. The other aspect of it is I talked about that 1011, which is just that little device. That little device, you can't put a hose on and go more than 10 feet in the air with it. So you could possibly do something like this on a 1011 at the floor level, but just so you're aware of it, 1011s have a little trick at the end when you turn it off. So if some of you experience that, you turn them off, it spits, because that's what it's supposed to do. And it's always at that angle, so it spits and it looks like you just wet your pants, because that's where the water comes. So that'd be the same thing with this one here. It's going to spit and it's going to bring water to you real quick. So,
Is it okay to put a transfer tank under the fish cleaning station?
it's not really an RV. So,
Well, if it's on wheels. I'm just saying.
put it on wheels, there we
There are
go.
people that have fish that are on lakes that aren't cleaning fish all the time. And would that be a viable solution? Because 9 times out of 10, fishermen want the fish cleaning place close to where they're getting out of their boats.
Right.
And not that I have one, but would it be feasible to put a transfer tank there and then have, the company come and pump it out when needed?
It's something that wouldn't be allowed by today's code. That's something that we can look at. More than a lot of these fish cleaning places like this one, again, not picking, I have no clue if that's even in Wisconsin where that is. A lot of times the floors are just pitched away. So you basically take the people that are cleaning the fish take their fish, they wrap up what's left of the entrails, they wrap them up in newspaper and throw them away, and everything else is washed off and it just falls off the edge, right, to the ground. That's typically what we see in most of these. I don't know if, I don't know if we're really at that point.
It doesn't have to go into.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
He's just saying that's what it's there.
That's what typically happens. I am not saying, no, that's good to go, so.
Yeah.
You're not getting that in writing either, so.
You got a lot of pens out there. You can take a pen for each letter.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen sinks like this in campgrounds with a 5-gallon bucket under there. You gonna shut that down?
No, I didn't say shutting anybody, I'm not shutting anybody down. That's okay. Those guys around your table shut people down, so. That's a lot, right?
So, you know, I mean, again, we're all sitting
No.
here, common sense sometimes doesn't enter into any decision. So, you know, a guy puts the sink up, wants to deal with the fish, you know, he's not gonna run a sewer line over there and go down and get a permit and drive, 500 feet of 4-inch for something that makes him zero money, okay, and he only deals with it for 3 months a year. So, I mean, I've seen these stations with a 5-gallon bucket for the wash down, and you take the bucket and throw it in the woods or whatever you do with it. But it would make sense that a guy could put a transfer tank there. I mean, you're in a campground, which is the only place you can have the tank. You gotta have a way to empty the tank, which obviously you do. And I'm containing all the waste, and I don't have the guy throwing it in the woods, which he's going to do. You know, if you don't make it easy for him, it's going to be where you don't want it, you know. I mean, you're lucky they wrap that stuff up in paper and throw it in your dumpster so that you can clean it up later.
Yes.
You know?
I'm hearing you, but that'd might be a suggestion that you can bring to our department.
That's why I say, you know.
I mean, I'm not against that. I mean,
Sometimes that's why I say it would be nice if, you know, if Waco could, you know, be privy to some of these things so that we can say, hey, in the real world, in the real camping world, this is what we would like to see.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not saying that, you know, we have any clout, but just to express our opinions on it.
well, compared to throwing it on the ground, compared to that, it seems like it's a feasible idea, and to run, like you said, 400 feet of pipe for a drain that, otherwise you have to have it near the building, and people don't want them near the building. They want to be where they're near the shoreline. I get it. But I think there's room for, again, we're looking at campground, again, I probably need to get through it, but we're looking at some campground things in our plumbing code. That's one of those that we can talk about, you know. So or that might be something that needs to be put into 327, because again, 327, the transfer tanks are there. It may be something that you could include on that, so. We're gonna talk about yard hydrants also, and I actually have one in my truck that I was gonna bring in and missed it. But, so again, these yard hydrants that are out there are no longer allowed in Wisconsin, just so you're aware of it. It's not retroactive. So if you have this one in here, that nice Iowa, not picking on Iowa or anybody else, okay? They're just, the below ground bleed is the problem that are on these. We have been providing reasons why we don't allow them through farm technology days. We've had a display there for the last 15 years showing what the problem with these are. Realistically, if you open this valve up halfway, you get as much water out here as you do down there. So this is going into the ground at the time. This can also aspirate anything that's in there and put it up into it. That's why these are not allowed in Wisconsin. Besides the other addition of the backflow device, typically there's never a backflow device on there. And again, for farms, it's a direct connection to the ground with the water so that I can actually contaminate it, especially if I'm filling anything up with it as far as sprayers or anything else. So again, more of a farm issue, but we're also seeing these in campgrounds. So you probably may have one or two in your site right now. What is available out there right now is different styles. One that uses a heater. Again, we don't see very, very few of these. Basically, it's a dip tube heater. The other one is the hydrant. It's made by a specific manufacturer. That's the one that I actually have a sample in my truck. Again, I'm not selling these, I have nothing involved, but what happens is that you can remove these. That's why the angle of it unscrews itself. That you can pull it in and out of the ground, you can use it any time of the year. And then there's the sanitary one. The sanitary ones are fine if you understand how to use those. What happens with the sanitary one, depending on how far it is out there, you need at least 20 pounds of pressure for that thing to operate. Talk about pressure requirements. It needs 20 pounds of pressure for required in order to drain itself out. So if it doesn't drain itself out, it's going to freeze, and you just spent $400 on a sanitary hydrant that's busted out there. And that's one of the problems that we have with it. Again, I don't sell any of these products, not recommending them. I just have this one because it's simple. All I know is the other one, again, that I showed here, is a problem with cross connections with the ground right now. It basically is an injection well is what that thing is. And again, it has been no longer allowed. We are not ordering them out, except if we know if it was installed after 2001. September of 2001 is when they were. You can still get these in every hardware store. At every big box store, you can still get these things. Why, people say? It's because we live in the greatest country of the world with a free enterprise system. I can put that thing in the roof of this building. And that's what we're seeing more and more of these things put in roofs. And they drain out in the wintertime so that I can clean up everything that's on the roof as far as I should say the HVAC systems that are up there. That's why they're still allowed here in Wisconsin. You can't use them per se in the ground here though. So, any questions on those? So again, we're looking at campgrounds, also service buildings. One of the things we want to make sure that everybody's aware of, if you have a public swimming pool on your property and yet that restroom is for that public swimming pool, you cannot have a coin-operated shower for that building. Just so everybody's aware of it, okay? People are required to take showers before they go into pools. How many do? Well, wait, how many people go into pools? So, I hate pools, but that's okay. Pools. But again, it's just something to be aware of. Coin-operated ones are not allowed. You can have them in the other parts of the campground. You just can't have it for the shower room for the pool.
So when you say that, how many showers are you talking? Is it one shower?
It could be.
So you're talking one shower?
No, shower room.
Shower room.
So if I have a building.
As long as you have if you have one shower room available for showers.
Well, again, it's by the code. Whatever required showers that you have to have for your pool, that's what you have to have.
You go back one on that.
Sure.
Is that the sanitary shower or is that the shower?
That is the sanitary shower. That's the soap and water shower. Shower alongside the pools do not count for the number in showers. You have to have a sanitary shower. That's under the requirements in 390, which is the pool code. Yes, sir.
So did I understand that you need a sanitary shower that's attached by concrete to your pool and an outside shower?
No. Our code requires for specific pools to have showers. The pool code is 390. Those required showers cannot have coin operated. So again, a sanitary shower is one that I'm going to be in a locker room. I'm going to be using soap, water, and whatever else. The rinse-off shower is the one alongside the pool that you can do whatever you want with it. It doesn't even have to be there. Typically you're putting it in there for convenience for people. People still are not using the showers that are there. They'll use the outside shower, go back to their room, or they'll go back to their site or wherever else and do other things.
Okay, so the sanitary shower that no one uses requires soap.
Yes.
Does it require hot water?
Yes, it does.
Where in the code does it state that?
I'll say that in the plumbing code. If your fixture is required to have hot and cold running water, you have to have it.
Okay, I've been looking for that and I haven't found it. Do you know what the plumbing code is?
Yep, 382.4 parent 3 talks about where hot water is required. It also talks about tempered water.
And a men's and a women's sanitary shower or just one?
If it depends. If it's required, whatever required by the code.
By the pool code?
By the pool code, yes. There's a table in the pack of the pool code, which is SPS 390. And there's a table in it that tells you how many toilets that you need, how many lavs you need, how many urinals you need, the number of drinking fountains that you need, depending on your... What's that?
That's for the whole campground,
No,
not just for the pool.
that's just the pool code.
All right.
Yep. Okay. Okay?
And when did they put in
That's been a long time, because you're required under specific rules to shower before you go into a pool and shower after your pool.
What do you do to the person that doesn't take the shower? You got a law that nobody's, what do? You let them.
You as the owner should be requiring these people so they would, it saves you in chemicals on your pool. It saves you on,
You know it doesn't happen.
I know I know what the speed limit is too, but I'm not gonna say that I broke the speed limit getting here.
You may get home.
You get a ticket for not taking a shower.
So what determines that my pool is for public?
If your pool is not in your home, two family dwelling, it's a public pool. So this place has got a pool, it's a public pool. I can have, and again, this is not a public, it's a public building, but it's a privately owned, right? So it's basically anything that's not in a 1 and 2 family dwelling, a 1 family dwelling is considered a public pool. So we're having the issues with the BYBOs and all these other things that want to have the pools, and they want now, because now to become a public building, they have to now meet the 390 codes, which most residential pools do not meet the 390 codes. So moving on with it, then we get talking about, I think I'm running out of time here, I'm sorry, you're probably wanting to be some of the places, but I just wanted to get through some of the other things about, again, these stations. Again, we're looking for backflow devices on the top of them as far as the filler. I also want to talk a little bit about some of the proposed code changes that are out there. And again, some of the things that you've been asking for and that we're doing. We're going to be looking at, I don't know what I read, some of this is existing language, and they're not showing up very well. Are they showing up with red? The red is the changes. No red. So what happens is that we're changing our sewer size, for instance, to go, that is required to be 4-inch. We're actually going down to 3-inch in some areas, back to 3-inch. When I first started out plumbing, it was 3 or 4-inch. We're going back to 3-inch because we're not using as much water as we used to. But for camping, except for camping units. Again, so if I want to put one sink in, if I want a sewer to be 2-inch, you can have that. That's where some of the changes are going into the plumbing code. So there's not going to be a separate plumbing code just for campground changes. Okay, so that's one of the things. So again, minimum size sewers are also there. We're looking at this is all new language here in regards to it. Again, I can have a 2-inch vent on the bottom that can be turned down, that can be screened. We're looking at, here's my Y connectors. We may have to expand on that in order to say where they are not allowed, okay? And again, I don't have a problem with that. If I need to know, you know, this is, the input has been great. So, and again, looking at indirect, these camping units. So if you have a camping cabin, are you making an indirect connection to it, or are you making a direct connection to it, the water supply? We're giving you the option of doing both. Again, it was not ever addressed in the code. But depending on what you're doing. And again, this is proposed code language about the pad that's out there. You'd be surprised at the number of pads that are out there for the sanitary dump station that's really way too inadequate. You're getting sewage all over the place compared to where it's supposed to go. So, but there's always been rules in there about the size of those pads. We're just making them a little more. So we're also saying a minimum of a 1/4-inch pitch, so it pitches to the drain. Well, we also found out that we also have to make a maximum so that people aren't stepping into the pad and killing themselves because they're sliding down a hill, right? So that goes both ways. So basically that's, sorry I had to rush through it, but you're probably all wanting to be somewhere else. So any other questions that I can help you with? I was afraid I was going to have enough time, or I'd have too much time. So, anything else? Any other issues, concerns? Like I say, we are making some code changes at our website, our plumbing website. You're more than welcome to look at it and to make any code suggestion that you feel that we should be possibly addressing.
Well, I want to thank you for coming. I think the most important thing is this why thing, and I think we all now understand your concern was when we have one pedestal and all kinds of people turn it No, we don't even think that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there are people, I know I've seen it, okay? But I've seen it in state parks, I swear to God.
Oh, you see them everywhere. Yeah, I know.
They say, okay, well, we got 5, 10 sites here. Well, there's 5 hoses running over there with, you know, that's not what we're thinking. If we got a one-on-one, there shouldn't be any problem if there's a backflow diverter and a Y for that one guy's trailer. It should not even be a concern. If it's feeding more than one, yeah, I get it. Then take it off, put a T on there, put some ball valves on it. And even then, you might have a problem because you won't have enough water volume.
Then you need plan review.
And the plan review, which, that ain't gonna happen, so.